Why does the internet keep doing these things? Alright. So, 100 minstrels versus 1 gorilla. Now, we need to set up our what exactly this is, right? The gorilla, I'm going to say, is the biggest, largest that it can possibly ever be and has ever been found, which is the largest gorilla ever. Basically 6'4" in height. It was 6'3.9", so basically 6'4". It had a wingspan of 270 centimeters. John Jones has a 215 centimeter wingspan, will reach. So that's 55 centimeters longer than the longest in the UFC. So this man reaching big. This was a massive animal, by the way. And it was 219 kilograms in weight. Now, for an actual gorilla, that's actually on the smaller side of the weightiest males. So the biggest I think ever recorded was it was 800 pounds, which I don't actually know what that is in kilograms, but it's a lot more than that. So this is quite a lean gorilla. However, that's still 219 kilograms of pure muscle and force. And the 100 people is 100 average men. So that's height of median 5'10" and weighing about, let's say, 120 to 150 pounds. So now that I've set the stats for what's actually fighting, what the battle is, I want to tell you a little interesting fact. There has been no officially recorded human death by a gorilla. Now, I'm not dumb enough to know that officially recorded doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. Obviously, somewhere along the line, someone has been killed by a gorilla. But from what I've seen and what other people have been saying on sources and articles and shit, there is no official recording of a gorilla death. And even if there is not that many, and probably will be in zoo scenarios and not wild. And another factor that I would add into this fight is every single person in that room and the gorilla is at 100%. So I'm saying all 100 people in that room are jacked on adrenaline because they're about to fight a gorilla and they know that. And the gorilla is at 120% aggressiveness because it believes every single person in that room is trying to attack its troop. I have to set those boundaries, otherwise the gorilla would most likely just try and escape because they're very docile. So, given all these factors, who wins? The humans absolutely smoke this thing. And what I mean by smoke is minimal injuries, minimal deaths compared to the majority of the 100 people. I believe maximum, worst case scenario, about 8 people die and about 20 people get injured. And I believe any other injuries would come from self-inflicted harm on both hands and feet. And another thing I want to mention is everyone's just wearing pants in this scenario because you want to make it as raw and just no clothing to hold on to or anything. So just mano, 100 mano versus 1 apo. Now, why do I think this is the case? Well, what I'm going to do here is show you a clip of 2 gorillas fighting. Now, I know this isn't max 100% aggressiveness. However, it is a defensive display and it does show a large amount of what they're capable of.
Everybody is kung fu fighting. Moves as fast as lightning.
Welcome to the UFC, baby! It's over!
Well, kung fu fighting. Bye.
So yeah, this thing's using fucking jiu-jitsu. So I think everyone in that room's fucked. No. In all honesty, that is how I believe the fight goes. And I think it is maximum that about 8 people die. Because the main weapons of the gorilla are just its pure smashing strength and its bite force. Because it has the 5th highest bite force of any animal with about, I think it's 13,000 psi. And the strength one is a weird one for me because I don't think it actually translates that much to the fighting. They say it's about 10 times its own body weight in movable strength. And they say it's strong enough to lift about 800 kilograms just out of pure strength. But what you need to think about is this is a fight. And I wholeheartedly believe if those 100 people fought any level of smart, it would take about 2 or 3 people per limb to hold this thing down, maybe even less. So if you have 2 or 3 people on each of this thing's limbs, holding it down, you have what, 80 people to stamp on this thing's head? Because that is honestly how I see this going. I think 100 people on one side, gorilla on one side. They charge at each other. This thing goes straight through into the middle of those 100. It knocks out the first layer of 8 people who get knocked to the side. Because I think it would be an incredibly just not natural thing for it to just lock onto the first person it sees and try kill them. I don't think that's happening. I think it just runs through the straight of them trying to eliminate all threat. And it then gets into a circumstance where it's now surrounded on all sides. And in that scenario, I know this is going to sound weird, I think its bite becomes almost meaningless. Because the bite is used as an individual weapon. It's not something you can kind of just... like a crocodile, kind of. But even so, like I said, is individualized. It would have to focus on one person to try and get the bites in. And on the point of it being individualized, it would not go for pure grabbing force. Because any level of it trying to hone in on one person as it's being surrounded would leave it very vulnerable. So just flinging its arms about at everything that moves is probably its safest bet. So in this scenario made up in my head, which I believe is the most likely outcome of how this works, I think at this point in the fight it's just really, really scrappy, and it's kind of more or less flinging people and maybe knocking a few people out purely just with its forearms and moving strength. And on that point, I think it's a good time to mention that gorillas are just absolute stamina dildos. Because they go in, rush in, massive explosive power, so much strength, and that drains them and they are finished. And they use all of their stamina up immediately. So I reckon a few minutes of the scrappy in the middle of 100 people, just flinging its arms about, knocking a few people out, not necessarily very many injuries. It might bite a few people. I do not think it ends up killing maybe anyone. And then it's going to start to slow down, and as it does, it's very easy by that point. Because I'm going to take into account that by this point, maybe about 5 people have died in worst case scenarios, and I'm going to say 10, maybe 10 people are knocked out. So that leaves another 85 people to just swarm this thing. And I believe wholeheartedly that 85 people have the strength to just curb stomp this thing's head in. Because I do not think that silverbacks are renowned for their skull strength. And also, even if the fight didn't play out like this, I think enough people would be throwing punches at this thing that would end up breaking all the teeth in this thing's mouth. And like I said before, what I think the most lethal weapon of a gorilla is not actually its strength, it's its bite force and its actual mouth. The most lethal weapon, what's going to most likely kill you. So in this other more violent scenario where it has just been far more of just a bloody fight and far more of just a clash of people punching and kicking and the gorilla hasn't just charged through, I think just the sheer number of adrenaline jacked up people throwing punches and things is going to end up breaking this thing's mouth, and it's just going to wear this thing down till it just gets swarmed. So that's my expert, 100% expert opinion on what happens in this scenario. Because I've seen Forrest Galante, bro said he kills about 50, which is half, and he still says the 100 people win. I do not think in any scenario, in a fighting scenario, 50 people get killed by a gorilla. I think that is basically impossible. Even purely on looking at the animal on paper and how dangerous it is, I still think it killing, fatalizing 50 of the 100 ain't happening. Because I think that is thinking about it way too animal on animal, whereas it scrappy fight. Because it's never going to be clean, every punch ain't going to land, every whack of the fist isn't going to knock someone out. Far more realistic. Because you might think about it, the gorilla just looks at you, grabs your face, tears it off. In a technical world, yeah, that could happen. Has it ever done it? No. Do you think it's like One Punch Man and punches your chest and you die? I don't actually think so. I think worst case scenario, it breaks your ribs and punctures your lung, which could lead to killing you. But just on pure force alone, I do not think that just one punch will kill you. Like I said, I think in the actual scramble, you could get knocked out with just pure force of blows. But just pure volume of people alone, Not a chance. So that's what I think on the gorilla versus 100 people. Now, I've seen other people debate much larger animals. You're all delusional. Anyone, now I'm saying anyone who believes that a rhino or a hippo would not decimate 100 people, you are completely and utterly stupid. Because a gorilla, I wholeheartedly believe we have the force, just in numbers, to be able to physically crush into its bones and hurt it. Now, tell me what the fuck we do against a rhino or a hippo. If we are just bare naked, just our hands and our brains, what the fuck do we do against a hippo or a rhino? Only 100 people. Only. Not a chance. The best chance we have is if someone decides to sacrifice themselves by implanting themselves in this fucker's throat. I'm talking a full Superman jump down this thing's neck to try choke it to death. And that is your only chance, and no one's that accurate with their own body, especially when this thing's running towards you. A hippo. The most dangerous land animal in all of Africa apart from a mosquito. Those absolute buses kill 500 people a year. They are monsters. We physically cannot hurt it. And it's the exact same with a rhino, even less so. Because hippos are just pure blubber and mass. Whereas rhinos, it's actual hardened leathered skin, literal armour. And you are off your nipples and tits if you think we can do anything to either of them. I think maybe, just maybe, that 1,000 people could kill either one of these animals. And do you know what technique you'd have to use? The same technique that honeybees have to use against those deadly hornets, I think it's in Japan, where they literally just crowd around this thing and using pure body heat alone, cook it to death. And I'm even unsure if 1,000 people are capable of doing that. Like I said, your only chance is to literally choke this thing with your body, and you die in the process. But realistically, I think neither of these animals will get into a position where you can just get down this thing's neck, because you can't hold it. Now, I should have done this animal before that, because it would be a progression, but anyway, a grizzly bear is a lot more maybes and buts. I'm just going to get this out of the way. A grizzly bear bums a gorilla. Anyone that thinks otherwise has an absolute froob in their head. A grizzly versus 100 people is a little bit of a harder battle. People will 100% die in this battle compared to what I think actually happens with a gorilla. Because it isn't just force with a grizzly. It's a lot of force and also claws and teeth. Not to mention far, far more mass. However, I think basically the same thing happens with a grizzly as it does with a gorilla. There's just far more injuries and far more fatalities. I think I saw one comment on a TikTok video referencing an elephant in the case of an animal versus 100 people. I'm just going to sit on that for a second. An elephant? Going back to the hippo and rhino argument, 1,000 people are definitely not killing an elephant. 100 people, not a chance. If there's an elephant and there's 100 people in the room, the 100 people should stick their forearms down their own throats. Because they are not winning against what I imagine is a fully grown African bull elephant. And even if I was in the room of 1,000 people, I'd do the exact same thing. However, I'd want to eat my own foot instead. And in all realism, I think the amount of people it would take just physically bare raw to kill an elephant just with pure... It would have to be on numbers because there's nothing you're going to do against a fucking elephant. I think most likely, if you put the number at 3,000 people, just pure bodies in a room against one elephant, I think the 3,000 people most likely kill it. Don't ask me how. And I know you're going to say, 2,000 people can definitely kill a bull elephant. No, they can't. And if you're saying that, I don't believe you. Because I think 3,000's the number where it gets tired. And by that point, and that point only, is the point where, I don't know, you jump up on its head and you reach behind its eye socket into its brain. It's just the pure mass of an elephant which is so pointless to try go against. And I think even at 3,000, it's a fucking maybe. Which I know 3,000 sounds like a lot of people, and it is to some extent, but all you really need to imagine is one of those like Indian festivals where there's all those thousands and thousands of people, and there's one Indian elephant far smaller, well not far smaller, but significantly smaller than an African bull elephant. And if you ever see those videos of those Indian elephants going rogue in the middle of those festivals, no one there can do a fucking thing. You are completely at the mercy of this animal, and that's an Indian elephant, like I said, not an African bull, who are far more aggressive. So yeah, that's the end of my goddamn tirade. This has annoyed me quite a bit, by the way. I just think people need to think far more about the level of survival that people will go to against these animals, and the same for the animals. But I think you also need to realise that the animals are not smart enough to utilise all the attributes that they have. For example, a gorilla I do not think is going to actually use its strength to rip, tear, grab. Attributes that if it fully did do and utilise, it could end far more than I think it actually would. And in the case of the people fighting, I think you need to think how dirty we would fight. We're going for the eyes, we're going to try reach behind the eyes, we're going to probably go for the tongue, we're going to go for everything. Not gonna lie, I wouldn't be surprised if someone says, if you attack from its arse, up its arse, what's it gonna do? Very valid point. Like, you'd have to think how desperate people would actually fight in these scenarios. I know it ain't that serious, but
It's a matter of life and death.
Anyway, let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I'm wrong. Don't worry, I'm going to defend my opinion till the last, because I believe it is almost completely true. But yeah, just let me know. Let me know any other animals you think would be a good matchup against 100 people. So yeah, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. And stop talking about dumb stuff on the internet. Bye. Bye. Bison.